Project. Today is Friday. It is the 10th of August, and it's our great pleasure to have with us for this 30-minute interview, Reverend Montreal, just like the city.
That's right.
Montreal Howell. Reverend Howell, thank you very much for being with us. You were born in Wilkes County.
Yes.
Just a few years ago.
Yes, just a few.
Tell us what part of the county you were born in, and a little bit about your growing up with brothers and sisters, I understand.
Yes, I was born in the, I call it the upper part of Wilkes County, right next to Caldwell County, a place they call Boomer. And I grew up out of a large family, and I have 18 full brothers and sisters and 4 half. And so for that reason then, we're 17. My father was father of 22 children, married twice. And he was a preacher, Methodist preacher, and I grew up in church. I had to go to church, but in those days we went to church in wagons. We didn't have cars. We went to church in wagon. And in 1927, I was going to the old Thankful School that was right near Thankful Church there in Boomer. And my cousin was teacher, and she bought a new 1927 Ford. And this old car, it had isinglass windows in it instead of glass windows, had isinglass curtains. And had a little hole to put your hand out to make your signal. Didn't have turn signals, but I told some of them after I grew up that when John Glenn walked on the moon, he didn't do no more than I did when I got my first ride. All dirt roads, there's no blacktop roads. In my early childhood, going from Wilkesboro to Lenore, Taylorsville was all dirt roads. And you'd come to a creek. There's not many bridges back then. You just ford the creek, drive through it, and go on. Wagon, car, whatnot, just go on, just go through it.
From Wilkesboro to Lenore, how long would it take you to get there?
Well, I'm not sure, but just take by wagon and the early automobiles, it's quite a task. In other words, if you had to go by wagon or the early automobiles, you just might be able to take about a day to make the round trip if you had any business much in the city.
So growing up, you didn't travel real far from home. Where you were was pretty well where you stayed because it was so hard to get anywhere else.
That's right, that's true.
So everything that you had was close to your house.
It was close to the house.
The community had to be close.
That's right. And, well, everything was right there. You know, I talked to my wife this morning, and I said, I listen to people talk about my breakfast and where I got my breakfast, but I'm sorry, but they really don't know. When we were growing up, if we were all eating steak or pork chops or whatnot, we could see it come from one cow or one calf if it was veal. But now then, the family might sit down to the table and be 5 people at the table, all of them be eating from a different calf. Mm-hmm. But we knew what was eaten in those days. When we had a biscuit, I raised wheat, cut the wheat with a cradle. I done that myself. And then we'd stack the wheat. I learned how to stack wheat at an early age. And we stacked the wheat, and then the thrashers would come through with a thrashing machine and thrash the wheat out. We'd put all the wheat from one field in a pile, and then when it dried, we'd take it to what we call the roller mill and get flour made out of it. Well, we was all eating biscuits out of the same field. But now then, your biscuit might come from a variety of fields because they bring all the wheat into the granary and dry it there, and then it's divided up and sifted from the many different farms, and you really don't know how many fields your biscuit come out of.
What you're saying makes me think of some things.
Uh-huh.
So let me express a few thoughts to you, and then you can respond to me.
Right.
You knew exactly where you were, who you were,
Right.
and what it took to live.
Right.
You had strong roots into the earth,
Right.
family.
Right.
That's not the way it is today.
No, it's not.
Was that a better time? When you grew up, because you had all of these roots and you had this affinity for the place and what you were doing?
Right. Well, I see it's kind of like when you look back over time and see, you say a lot of time we had better days back then. In one way, it was better. And then in another day, you don't want to go back there, but you wish we had some of the qualities was put into life back in that day that's not here now. We've lost a lot of quality in life that one time was in there, but it's come out what we say is better day. It's more of a fast time now than it was then, but we've lost a lot of quality of life that we had back then that we don't have now.
Talk to me a little bit about those qualities.
All right.
It's very important.
Some of the main qualities was back then, we had some security, a little more than money to depend on. We had 2 hogs in the pen. We had 2 or 3 milk cows. Didn't have any pastures. We had stakes to stake them out. And there was a quality there that the youth of that day, they had some chores around the house that more than looking at television, they knew we had some chores tonight. We knew that before the sun went down, we had to have our night's wood cut, put on the porch, box behind the stove filled up with wood to cook breakfast. The old water reservoir on the stove, we had to go to the spring and carry water to put in that reservoir on the stove so we'd have warm water to take the baths with and whatnot. And this gave the children a sense of security or a sense of responsibility that I'm afraid that we've lost a lot of that. So I would say that, yes, there was some better things back there in quality, although there's some more easier times now. But the quality, we've lost a lot of quality.
Good, thank you. Talk about your growing up and when you went to school and when you had to leave school.
Okay, when I grew up going to school, I first went to Thankful School, 2-room school building with what we call pot-bellied schools in the floor. And at that time, my sisters and I and my older brother, he's 5 years older than I was, we were walking to school, and we had, I'd say, at least 4 miles to walk. We didn't have overshoes, we didn't have umbrellas, and the school didn't shut down in those days because of a rainy time or because of a snow. Well, not the school still went on. And we would walk this distance to school. When we got there, a lot of times our shoes would be wet, our clothes would be wet, and we'd have a good fire in the stove, we'd pull our coats off and hang them on a chair around the stove and let them dry. And then put them back on. We were just happy with that. Well, our school, in my last part of the time that I was at Thankful School, I was a 2-room school building, but it didn't have a porch to it. It just had 2 doors to enter the school. Our teacher, he said, I'm going to teach you boys how to make boards to cover a building. We're going to put a porch to this school. And he got out there and he got a log, a forked log, and cut it down in about a 8-foot length, but it was forked close together. And he said, this is a frog. And then he got what looked like a mowing size, turned backwards, a little short handle to it. Now, this is a fro. And then he took a wooden maul hewed out of a small hickory tree with a handle to it and said, this is a maul. And I'm going to show you how to make boards to cover this building. He cut down a red oak and cut it in about 2.5-foot lengths and split it off, and then he'd set those pieces split off, he'd set it in this frog. And we'd take the fro and sit down and hit it with a maul at, say, about 3/4 of an inch thick. And the grain was so straight in that red oak, when you hit down and then prised over in that frog to hold it, when you prised over with your fro, it bust this shingle off. And then you had a shingle there to cover the building with. So we covered that porch with those with those shingles that we made. That was quite an experience for me. the teacher saw to it that we get some experience that we could live with in life. So then if I had to cover my house today and there wasn't else, I know how to make shingles to cover.
Now, later on in your schooling, you had to quit school.
Yes, it is.
Some of your brothers and sisters to continue to go to school.
That's right. With a relocation, at that time I got to be, well, I was about 13 years old. I tried, through 12 or 13, I tried at Lincoln Heights for part of 2 years. And I couldn't make the grade because I couldn't put in enough time. But I was working on a farm, and first job I had on a farm was, I was only 10 years old, first job that I had, and I was only making 3 cents an hour. But there'd come days, especially on Saturday, I'd work 8 and 9 hours for 3 cents an hour. And then the sad part about it, at that particular time, I couldn't get all the money for the 3 cents an hour. This man run a store, and he'd say, I'll pay you so much money, you take so much out of the store. So I'd buy so much stuff. That learned me some responsibility, that I had a responsibility back at home. On one time, I remember I was working, and I did some extra work at cutting wood, fire stick lamps, and we'd split the wood and load it on a truck and haul it to Westbury and sell it, working for a man that run a wood yard. And it was cold, and times was hard back then. And I paid 25 cents for a pair of gloves. My hands were cold. Well, I carried the new gloves home, and my mother looked at them and said, yeah. I said, but, said, we don't have food, and said, I wish that you bought something else with that instead of gloves. Well, I just dropped my head. I didn't say a word. So next morning, I took the gloves back to the store. And I got that quarter back and carried it, give it back to my mother. And these are some of the things that you learn responsibility from as you grow up.
Now, people who are looking at this video now will say, gosh, a quarter, that's not a lot of money. What could you buy with a quarter? So think back what 25 cents that your mom then had for, what would that have bought back in the time you're talking about?
Well, 25 cents, you could have bought, you see, everything was loose back then. You didn't, it was not bagged up like it was. You could have bought a scoop of sugar. You could have bought a cut of fat back. And then possibly you could have got a box of soda, all for a quarter. Mm-hmm. And you think of what one thing would cost you now.
Yeah. And you're talking about stuff that you'd buy from the store that you didn't have at your house.
That's right.
You'd have wheat flour.
That's right.
And you'd have meat.
That's right.
So you're talking about the things to go along with that.
That's right.
The sugar, the fat back, those things that you couldn't produce on your own.
That's right. Yes, sir. You could buy, let's say for instance, you wanted to buy a pair of socks, you get a pair of socks for 10 cents. And, well, if you wanted to mail a letter, you could mail it for 3 cents. And if you wanted to buy, I never did smoke for that reason, but if you wanted to buy a bag of Prince Albert tobacco, a little bag, and roll your own, you could get it probably for 10 or 15 cents. So these are some of the things that's been a great change in.
You did not get your high school diploma for a long time.
No.
You worked many years before you had the chance to go back and get your high school
That's
diploma.
right.
What types, we'll get to that story in just a minute.
Okay.
Before I ask you that, what types of employment did you go through?
All right. Well, mostly after I quit school, the first job I had, I worked at a rock quarry. I was just 15 years old. And I worked at a rock quarry with men. And I mean, we had these heavy hammers, and we would load them rock in those skips to grind up, haul them to the crusher and crush the rock. And that was the first job I had. I worked a few months at that, but it was too hard. Then I went from that to work at a flower garden a while, and I didn't like that. Then I worked on a while, and then I went to the furniture factory. And that's where I spent after I quit school, after I went through the work at the milk dairy and whatnot, and some farm work. I finally settled down in the furniture factory, where I stayed there for 34 years in the furniture factory. So that was mostly my livelihood and rearing my family.
Now, which furniture factory was that? It was here in Wilkes County.
That's in Caldwell County.
Caldwell County.
That's right, Broad Hills Furniture Factory Corporation.
We have recently interviewed one of the Broad Hills.
No, say, and so I worked there until, and all this goes to that. I got married when I was 18 years old, and I know it's all mixed up, but my life has been so mixed up. I talk about a few things at a time, and when I got married, so much different the way it is today. Now then, you buy electric range and Calvinator and all this, that before you get married, you prepare for it. But that day, I got my uncle's wagon and the mule and went back in the mountain at where they were shacking at a sawmill. And they had one of these little cast iron stoves that set up on the legs, and I bought the stove for $7. But I didn't have the money to pay for it. I bought it on the installment plan. I paid for it 25 cents a week till I got it paid for. And then, the sweet part about it, though, the wagon had a plank across the bed, and I got my newly married wife on there, and we rode back in the mountain and got the stove and brought it out and put it out, and that was a cooking little stove. It got so hot. And that's how we got started. And I didn't have a radio, but I finally got to the place where I could buy a battery radio. So I got that, and then my home was the entertainment center for the young people of that community. And so that's how I reckon I've become to be a leader of young people. They'd come to my home. We'd watch the Grand Ole Opera till 12 o'clock at night. Then I come to the place that I wanted to organize a Boy Scout troop, and organized a Boy Scout troop, and I had 31 boys in the troop. Now then, those boys have grown up and their fathers and grandfathers, and they come by and we talk about the days of scouting. We went to Camp Reeves in Winston-Salem, and so we won the chariot races there one time. We made our own chariots. And I took a 50-gallon drum and carried it to a friend of mine, done weld. He welded an axle through there and cut it down for bicycle wheels on it, and then cut it down high in front and lowered the back. That made it like a Roman chariot, and the rower could stand up in there and hold it, and the other pull it. And so we had a tongue in it long enough for 4 boys to hold the tongue with crosses on it and to hold it and run, and then 2 out front to pull the larger boys to be sure to pull hard to go on. So we come in second place with one of the boys laying across the tongue. He got over the balance and fell over. We didn't stop. We just hauled him on in. That was a great experience.
You spent a lot of years in the furniture factory.
Yes, sir.
But it seems like after that time, the Lord had something else wanted you to do.
Yes, he did.
When did you get your call? Tell me about that.
All right. When I was called into the ministry, I'm a man to remember dates and years or whatnot. But I know this call to the ministry, I fought it for some time. I thought I could be a good enough Sunday school teacher to take the place of the call, but I was teaching Sunday school as a deacon at that time, but I was just so sure that was it. I went all the way to Taylorsville to talk to my pastor and tell him what I found out was wrong with me. I just needed to be deeper in deaconship and Sunday school teaching. And after I went to the call to the ministry, then he laughed about it and said, I knew that wasn't what it was. It was something else. So after that, I started pastoring. Well, my first was, I got a call. I'd been only preaching 6 months. And I got a call from Landgraf, West Virginia, to come to conduct a revival. My aunt lived there and uncle, and they'd never heard me preach. And so they talked with their pastor and told him that I called into the ministry. So, well, let me give him an experience. They called for me to come to Landgraf, West Virginia. So I went there and stayed a week and run a revival. And when I come back, I'd been preaching 6 months. Well, when I was preaching 8 months, they called me for pastor at Parks Grove Church with a 6th grade education. Only 8 months into the call, I was called to pastor a church. But what made me able to do it, my former pastor, he took a stock in Reverend Fred Carlton and myself. We were young ministers in the church, and he put us through all it took to be a pastor in the church under him. He let us hold church conferences and things like that. So we were well prepared in the short time that he had to work with us. We both started pastoring early in life, and so we was able to handle the church to the extent with that little amount of education, with as much experience as we had, was able to carry on with the church. I pastored that church for 2 years, and then I was called to the present church, Mount Pleasant Church in Jonesville, where I am now. And I stayed with the 2 churches for about 2.5 years, and it was too much for 2 churches, and I had an assistant pastor where I went to, and they asked me where I left from if I would select a pastor for them. I told them no. I said, well, that's your responsibility. I said, if you find a pastor, I said, I'll recommend him to you if I know him. So they chose my assistant pastor, took my assistant away from me. So I couldn't help but recommend him highly, Reverend W.O. Brown. I recommended him highly for that position. Well, he stayed there until he retired. And so I've been where I'm at for...
Was he with Wings of Healing?
No.
Was that different?
He was with Parks Grove.
Parks Grove.
Parks Grove.
Reverend C.O. Reed.
Oh, C.O. Reed, I know him, yes. This is W.O. Brown. That's right. And so Reverend Brown was one of the head printers that appeared for many years at the printing press here in Wilkesboro. He worked there. So after he went there, he stayed there. He retired a few years ago, and then he come back home. And so he's back now at home. He's retired from pastoral work, but he's back now, assisted me again after leaving and staying all those years. He's back, and we're working together again at Mount Pleasant Church.
After all these years.
After all these years.
After all these years, you're back together again.
We're back together.
And a few years ago, I understand that, you got another calling, and that calling was to go back to school to get something that you had missed earlier.
That's right. Yes,
Your
sir.
high school diploma.
That's right.
Tell me about that.
All right. Then I was, after all my children had finished high school, I said, I'd like to go back to school. And, well, I mentioned in church one Sunday, in our association, when all the churches are together, I mentioned in Reverend Coot Gilreath. He worked at community college a long time. He said, why don't you go back to school? I said, I'll try. Well, I went back to school. First went to a school at the community center in Boomer. The class ran a little while and it broke up. One started in the old Thankful School there at Boomer, the last school that was there before it was consolidated. I went there a little while and that broke up. Well, I said, I'll just quit. I won't try no more. Reverend Gilreath said, why don't you come over to Pleasant Hill Church? Said, I've got a class there. I'm going adult basic education. You might like it. I said, okay. I said, I'll try it. So I went over there, and 2 of his members were teachers, and they were running a class in that school. So I went there for a little while. When it started out, here's the part about it. In life, I started a self-improvement program, and I would read everything I could get my hands on. And I was going to school, and I couldn't spell hardly anything, but I could read at the 12th grade level. She said, I don't understand you, Mom. I said, see, here you is, and I know I tested you can't spell nothing much, but said you're reading on the 12th grade level. You know how I learned how to read fast? I learned how to read signs while I was driving. I'd be driving at 60 miles an hour. I wouldn't recommend that, but I done it. And I would be trying to read signs to see how much of that sign I could catch as I passed by and read it. And I'd try that sign if it was a big sign. Every time I drive by, I get a little bit more. And I got by where I could read that sign just like that to pass it. So I learned to observe reading, and a lot of times I'd be reading the first line, and I could tell just about what was on the second line. I mean, that don't sound logical, but I just built myself into that.
So you got your high school diploma.
Yes, sir.
For all those years. It must have been a proud moment for you to fulfill that desire you had.
That's right.
And now with that high school diploma, you have continued your work, and you've written a book. Can you tell us a little bit about the book you have written?
Yes, at 87 years old, I've become to be, in my community, I come to be everybody's uncle. So Uncle Mom said, why don't you write a book? Well, I decided then I would write the book, and one day I was sitting down, and I said, I'm going to write a book, but I need to know what I'm going to write about. I was all right, I said, I know from 1927, from the time I got my first ride in a car, I said, I know about 1940 flood. I said, I know what it is to rear a family. I know what it is to put life together. I said, we're living in so many changing times. I said, why not write about reviewing changing times? And I started out that reviewing changing times, and I said, I need an introduction to it. And I talk about the walking the old paths of life. And in these old paths of life, most of the time when you strike a path, there's always been somebody there before you was. Because you don't just start and make a path, it takes traveling to make a path. Somebody had traveled a path, and I started out by saying that I was born in 1919, and I was wrapped in a blanket and laid in a path that somebody else had already made. But my mother loved me so much that she took me and guided me in that path. As I started out this new path in life, as I traveled, I thought about, I first got up and crawled a little ways in this path, and I sat down and probably laughed a little and cried a little and then crawled backwards. And then got up and went over the same place again and sat down and laughed a little bit, and then looked at the door, was not able to reach the knob, but I pointed at it. Somebody opened it for me, and that started the path of life when I got out that door.
What's the name of your book?
Reviewing Changing Times. You know how it is now, but this is how it was then. And it's going back. One chapter is reviewing bits and pieces of life. Then the next chapter, when you come down to 10 chapters, you'll find one in our automobiles. Were they always like this? No. It talks about the changes of automobiles. It talks about my father owned a Whippet and an Opel, and I rode in a Hupmobile and a Grim Page. We talk about the Grim Page, how you take a car, then you strip it down and make a unit to pull a sawmill. I experienced all that.
When will the book be published?
Hopefully in 90 days. We're trying to get it out in 90 days from now.
Available locally. Will be available here in Wilkes County?
That's where we're hoping to get it, here in Wilkes County.
Well, Reverend Howell, we thank you very much for the time you spent with us today. Our
Yes,
30
sir.
minutes is up, and we wish you great success with this book, and
Thank
God
you.
bless you for what you've done today.
Thank you. All right.